Hello, American history. Welcome to chapter 1. First, I want to say about your textbook, it's a good textbook. History is a narrative, it's a story. And this book does a pretty darn good job of telling a story. I really enjoy reading it, and I hope that you'll enjoy reading it as well. Let's get into the first chapter. The purpose of these videos is to just give you a 10-minute overview of the chapter and to kind of explain what you're about to read. All right, so chapter 1, the collision of cultures. And if you can imagine, man, this is crazy because you get the old world colliding with what they refer to as the new world, and it does not go well. To understand this, though, first of all, within chapter 1, we've got to clear up some big misconceptions, because some of the big misconceptions from this time period really shapes the way people view Native Americans today. So that's one of the big themes I'll always be talking about. What's the big theme I want you to take away from this? Part of the reason is because the story that we're told about American history is traditionally Anglo or English story. Okay? So let's clear some things up. First of all, Native Americans were not just simple, innocent people running around naked, wild in a Garden of Eden. To view them that way is to deprive them of their humanity. Native American societies had larger, more complex cities than Europe did at the time. Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire, was far larger than any city in Europe, London or Paris, which at that time was about the size of Fort Smith. So, and their cultures were very, very advanced. And they were very, very diverse. They were not all the same. And they were very human. They went to war with each other, just like Europeans had gone to war with each other. And the reason I think some of those misconceptions persist is because people still view Native Americans in that light. And it's important to understand that they had these complex civilizations. And in Europe, they're looking for a route to the east. Trade in the early 15th century, the mid-15th century, a couple of things happen. First of all, Constantinople becomes known as Istanbul. So it makes the route through what today is Turkey more difficult. And the Portuguese are out there, and for them the trading is more difficult. And so Prince Henry the Navigator, who never actually sailed, he sponsored the voyages of Vasco da Gama and Bartholomew Diaz, going to try to make it around Africa. And ultimately they do. So the Portuguese are the first. They find that route to Asia. And that's our route. So then Columbus comes along, and Columbus is going to try to convince people that he can get to Asia by sailing west. He can get to the east by sailing west. Now, they knew that the earth was round, but they didn't think Columbus could make it because they're like, it's too far. You'll never make it. And you want to know something? They were right. Columbus was wrong. It was way too far. He would have died, along with the whole crew. We would have all died. Except that what Columbus didn't know is there's this huge landmass there. And he bumps into that. And then when he gets there, he's like, I made it to Asia. And he goes back to Spain. And he's like, I made it to Asia. And he never knew. No, you weren't in Asia. You were in a new world. And over time, other explorers will follow Columbus, and that's why Columbus would become so important. A couple of things too. Columbus is sailing and is sponsored by Spain. He's not English, he's actually Italian, and he's sailing for Spain. Spain is going to lead the way in the New World. Portuguese had headed to the east, and then the Spanish, and that would allow the Spanish to establish this huge empire long before England ever comes along. But today that's forgotten to history because, again, it was the Anglos or the English that would tell this story. And I have a lot of students and people today who think Christopher Columbus was English. But no, Christopher Columbus is sailing for Spain, and Spain establishes these early colonies there. As I mentioned, when they get there, there's these complex, really diverse cultures that are part of the New World. And then there's this encounter. Among the encounters, first of all, is, of course, disease. And Native Americans had no natural immunity to diseases like smallpox and the plague, which is, they're all related, and they all come from domesticated animals. And Europeans, Africans, and Asians had all been around domesticated animals, so for millennia, they had built up some immunity to these diseases. There's only one domesticated animal in the New World, the llama. Thus, first of all, that's going to put Europeans at great advantage because they've got horses and ox and cows, and you can ride horses into war and so on. But second of all, the other great advantages it gives them is they had built up this immunity. And so 90%, as much as 90% of the Native American population eventually be wiped out by disease. Absolutely tragic. Don't mistake, though, that they're not all gone. The Europeans will come and will make it easier for them to conquer the New World and to repopulate the New World. But the Native Americans did not disappear. They were still here, and everything was taken from them. And they are still here today. And that's an important lesson too, because sometimes they're viewed, oh, they're just, they were in the past, and not at all. There's something else that the Europeans are bringing with them too when they set up these culture, and that is religious divisions. Because around the same time, and in fact, in 1517, so that is about 25 years after Columbus set sail, Martin Luther posts 95 Theses on the church door. Martin Luther was a Catholic priest, and he doesn't agree with the Catholic Church anymore. And that begins what's called the Protestant Reformation. So now, for the first time, you're going to have two branches of Christianity, and they're going to split. And over religion, they begin fighting with each other. And that fighting is going to spread to the New World. So the New World is going to become this place where, first of all, they're competing for empire. The Portuguese, the Spanish, and then the French come. And then the last ones to come are the British. And they'll end up, in some ways, winning the whole thing. But, I mean, that's an overstatement because nobody won the whole thing. They each laid claim. But they're not just bringing that. They're going to bring religious warfare, too, to the New World. And that's going to shape the New World as well, in how religion is perceived. And the other important part of this chapter, and I'm down to a minute and a half, is the reason Columbus is so important. And of course, we reevaluate Columbus day to day because, of course, the terrible atrocities that Columbus had done and committed, the murder against the indigenous people. But nonetheless, Columbus is so important. He wasn't the first. If you remember, there's Eric the Red, Leif Erikson, the Vikings had come before Columbus. So why is Columbus so important? Why do we remember him? Because the world will never be the same again. Collision of cultures. And when Columbus comes, others follow. And it leads to the Columbian Exchange. And the Columbian Exchange is a globalization network and the exchange of goods and products. New World products like coca and sugar and potatoes and turkey, and then Old World products as well that are being brought to the New World. And there's this just network of trade that starts to emerge in the 15 and 1600s, and the world will never be the same again. The Columbian Exchange is a huge part of that as well. Wow, a lot of stuff to this chapter. I did my best to provide some context to it. I hope that helps as you begin to read it, but do read it carefully and then do the assignment and the reading quiz. And as always, if there's any questions, please email me. And I'll see you next week when we take a look more directly at the Anglo experience or the English experience in the American colonies.